Yeah, I'm curious, all of a sudden, how many people say that when you were sitting right now, you sat with some amount of pain, whether it's physical or emotional? But like pain, definitely dealing with some pain. Yeah, anxiety, but like it kind of hurts like a little, right? So look around. Just in case, on top of that, the meaning that your mind laid onto that was there was something wrong with you and you're unique with all the pain. Did you just notice how many people raised their hands? Now check this out. Can you guys put your hands back up for a second? I want you to just try this for a second. Look around at some of these other people and just trip on that they're experiencing something similar to you. Like you didn't even know, but we don't have to even get into the details, but they're struggling. Like every one of these people, something similar to you. Something, some kind of suffering that we share actually with each other. I find that very moving, because I find that one thing, one of the sort of occupational hazards, if you will, of meditation. It's such a solitary thing we do, right? Even if we're in a group together sitting here, but it's just like me and my own mind and my own experience. It can be sort of I don't even mean like self-centered in a judgmental way, but just self-centered in the kind of pure sense of that word. Just, whoa, it's just like me and my experience, and it becomes very can feel very like we don't realize that we're sharing the experience really, or how common it is, and it can actually sometimes take this form like, oh, it's like me and my problems or my crazy mind. Like how many people think you're crazy? I don't even, like as you sit there and you watch your mind and the thoughts like, I'm fucking insane, man. Like, is anyone seeing this thing?
I had a question.
Yeah.
Near the beginning, you had said to treat that with kindness.
Yeah.
And I know what that means for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I was wondering if you could describe that a little more, what that meant.
The kindness? Yeah, I mean, for me, but if I show you mine, you got to show me yours. So I'll tell you what it means for me.
I like to hear other people.
But then I want to hear what it means to you, because you said you know what it means for you. And I'd like to hear other people too. It's sort of, on some level, it kind of comes down to this. Like I'll have some experience that's there, that's unpleasant. Something hurts, something aches, something, emotionally aches. And I can regard that and relate to it like it's basically an enemy. Like it's this thing that's bothering me. And it's this thing, and I wish it would go away. And I wish it would, sometimes I can't believe it's still here, or it's here again. But it's this intruder to me. It's this like pain in my ass. It's this thing that I regard as being sort of foreign. And how dare it's here, and how quickly can I get rid of it? It's funny, it's almost like, a word that we use a lot kind of in these circles, we talk about othering people, it's sort of like othering parts of yourself. It's like, oh, that's other, that's not me. And to me, that's a very antagonistic kind of way of relating. And to me, then kindness is the opposite of that, is that I see that and I go, oh, like it's compassionate. It's more like, oh yeah, like this is suffering, but I'm not here to like banish it. I'm actually like, yeah, this is part of it. This is actually part of the experience. This is part of being a human, or maybe even just a living being. And then the part that actually also helps me is, that's why I had everyone raise their hands, is that it actually helps me to see it not as just my suffering or my pain, but kind of pain in like the larger sense. I almost like, I don't necessarily think this is literally true, but I like to like play these mind games with myself, if you haven't, but I like to just kind of like, reframe things. So sometimes I'll kind of do this thing where I pretend, well, what it is there's just a certain amount of pain in the world, and like we all take turns holding it. Like it's just out there. It's just like this certain amount of it. And so I'll do this thing, and again, I'm not saying this is literally true, but I'll think like, oh, this pain I'm having, or this heart, this isn't mine. Like there's some kid somewhere, and I'm gonna hold this so like he or she doesn't have to right now. And again, I'm not saying I literally think that's true, but I notice that like when I do things like that, sometimes my relationship to the experience I'm having will shift so dramatically. You know? I remember one time meditating, and again, I don't think this is true, but I just like played this game with myself where I was like, no, you know what it is? It's like I'm like this bodhisattva, and I'm just sitting here and I'm feeling feelings for other people. None of this is mine. And I'm just holding it as an act of service. I mean, similar to what I just said, but that like none of it's mine. And it's amazing. I mean, it's just a mind game, but like it completely changes it. And instead of being like averse to it and trying to push it away, it's like, oh, I become curious about it. You know? This is what I mean. At one point I wanted to get to this where, I said like the mind's this meaning-making machine. So this is almost a way of, like, if you know that you can kind of play with the meanings by kind of intentionally messing with the meanings. Because they're all kind of made up anyways, all the meanings. And this way it's like making it up in a way that's skillful. Suzuki Roshi, I think, had this quote, or something like this. If anyone knows it, correct me, but it was something like, he said, well, if it's all an illusion anyways, or if it's all like a made-up story anyways, let's make it a good one. So on some level, I think kindness to me, it's this like, it's kind of seeing how like, hey, we're all in it. Like that there isn't like, oh, well, you're over there with your problems and I'm over here with mine. And it's like, no, this is the human condition. This is like we're sort of in it together. And that it's somehow a shared experience. And so then that activates the kindness and the compassion aspect of it. Does that make sense? What does it mean to you?
Well, it kind of goes in like a phase of where it starts out like Mara's on me and like projecting, and I start to like realize that it's coming from somewhere else, and at first there's like a lot of judgment on myself for like letting myself get there again, and then it moves to more of like how you would kind of treat a child or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your fault.
Right.
It's not. This is again like that human experience. Your mind does like nothing but, for the most part, while we're all here, it fucks with us so much.
Right.
And just having compassion for that part of me that's vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And, but a lot, right in the beginning, like there's always that, there's a lot of that like shame or that like,
right,
letting it happen again, like that whole thing.
Yeah.
Starts.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said at one point, you said where you see it like a child. Mm-hmm. And I find it interesting that you use that, and it's a very common thing. We say that all the time. I'm like, well, we talk about, like in metta, we say, oh, well, like imagine a child, or like think of things that way. And when you said that, I thought, what does that represent? Because we use that all the time, and it's a common thing to say. And I thought in that moment, but what does that signify? Like, why do we use that? Why do we use that metaphor of the child?
I don't think it's really a metaphor. I think a lot of it is from, childhood trauma.
You're right, but like we're not children. Well, where I was going with it is I think the reason we say that metaphor or that symbol is there's a couple of things I like to look at it. I think it's interesting. One thing is that I think one of the reasons we use it is a child it's forgivable, right? Like because if it's there's like a lot of things like if it's an adult doing that, it's like, dude, what the fuck, man, But if it's a child, it's like, it's okay, you're a little child, like. So there's this softness, right? There's this like kind of compassionate forgiveness when we think of it in terms of a child, right? And also, I mean, what else? There's like a vulnerability, right? Like children are vulnerable. And so it's easier to feel kindness for a child because they're small and vulnerable and sort of weak in a sense, right? And so there's this. There's just, I think, this probably evolutionary instinct to sort of protect them. But it's interesting, like within ourselves, within our internal experience, when does that go away? Like, does that ever actually stop? I mean, is our own vulnerability? It's like, no, you're 20 now. Sorry, your vulnerability is not valid anymore. I think I feel things as much as I did when I was a child. Don't you? Did you ever stop being a child at any point? Like, I'm not aware of this like division. Like it's always was me, right? And I'm still just me. And and they keep telling you they keep giving you a bigger and bigger number. Eventually some of your hair goes gray. But internally, like, I don't know, don't you kind of feel the same? So the sensitivity and the humanity doesn't really change. But I think, like, I don't know, there's like almost the feeling I get when you say the child, like in that context, like I think of a child, like there's just almost this instinct to hold the child, to give the child a hug or something. This kind of like protective and relating to one's own experience in that same way.
Can I say something real quick, Gene?
Yeah, please.
Sometimes it's hard for me to go like full kind awareness, but I do use that childlike curiosity. Like sometimes like that can develop like I'm just kind of curious, like what is that? Like how does that feel? And sometimes like that's about as kind as I get, but it's just funny how the whole child
with the curiosity, yeah.
I can use like a curiosity to me feels kind.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like pushing.
On the opposite end is this kind of, like I was saying, this kind of like real animosity towards our experience. Where we see this experience as this like intrusion and sort of foreign thing that I want to get rid of. And what I find all the time, I actually relearn this constantly, which is then a lot of the suffering we're feeling is that antagonistic relationship. You know what I mean? I don't know why, I get the funniest images in my mind. When I remember years ago meditating and feeling that and realizing like, oh wait, the way I'm relating to this is actually causing the experience. And for some reason for those of you who remember Bugs Bunny? You know that kids today aren't hip to Bugs Bunny? I was shocked by this. I was talking to kids today and anyways, but for those of us that know. Remember there would be these scenes in Bugs Bunny sometimes where he would take a baseball and like throw it really like hard and it would then come back around and hit him in the back of the head because it had gone like all the way around the earth. You guys remember this? No? Anyways, but it's this thing where like he throws it and then boom, he gets hit in the back of the head because it went all the way around the earth. So it's like that. This, no? All right, I could let this go. I'm not attached to this. But it's this way that like we are in the very experience we're creating. You know what I mean? Another pop culture reference. Remember in Empire Strikes Back? Where like Luke goes into that thing with Yoda, and Yoda's like, well, you'll find, whatever you go in, you'll find. And he finds Darth Vader. Remember, he tells him not to take his weapons, right? But he doesn't listen, and he takes his weapons, so then like Darth Vader's got a lightsaber too. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that, well, because that thing, for those of you who don't remember, didn't get it, right? Because that tunnel, he goes into that thing. But I know you're with me, buddy. I could see it. But that what he goes into is a creation of his own mind, essentially. Like, in other words, what he brings in is what he'll find. So if you go in with all this hatred and fear, that's the dream you're going to have, right? So we're sitting there kind of like hating on our experience and going, wow, this kind of sucks. I feel all tight. And it's like, yeah, but what you're feeling is the very hatred that you're producing. You see what I mean? Like in the very moment. Like you can have actually a very painful, shitty experience. And the moment you let yourself love it, you know what you start to feel? Love. Because what we're experiencing isn't the thing it's not the object we're watching. What we're experiencing is the way we're relating to it.
It's like taking the second arrow.
The second arrow. You guys know the simile of the second arrow? Thanks, Beth. It's a Buddhist teaching, conveniently enough. The Buddha says that the teaching of the second arrow is, he says that, if an enlightened person, if an enlightened being gets shot by an arrow, he still can get shot by an arrow. It's not that like you become somehow magical and impermeable to being hurt, but just gets stuck by the arrow. Now he says an unenlightened person gets stuck by the arrow, but then the mind starts going, oh my God, why did this happen? And who did this? And oh my God, what's going to happen now? And holy shit, I got to get revenge. And and all these stories go and go and go. And that in doing so, the person effectively shoots themselves with a second arrow. Right? And so he says, the point is that it's not, you can't control whether you get shot with the first arrow or not. That's just life. Like, in other words, like shit happens. But the second arrow, or even, let's get real, second or third, fourth, fifth arrow, right? I find with Buddhists, once you get into this practice, there's a third arrow, which is like, oh shit, I know about this. This sucks. I shouldn't be doing this. Like, I get it. That's the second arrow. I'm shooting myself with the second arrow. It's like, that's the third arrow right there. But it's like, I was wondering when I think I brought this up actually during the sit, was this, as the mind, seeing the mind as this meaning-making machine that just like cranks out meaning on everything. And I kind of invited you guys to take a look at that, and I was wondering, did anyone see that? Nobody saw that, huh? Mel saw it. Come on, baby, what you got?
I find that there's definitely a reflex that I experience to deduce and pull apart and understand whatever is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is nothing to unpack, something will be created to be unpacked.
Is there nothing to be unpacked?
So if there's nothing to be unpacked, nothing to be explained, something will be created to be unpacked and explained.
Right.
Like, oh man, I feel like I'm like shit. I wonder why. 3, 2, 1. Well, let me talk about it.
Right.
Oh, right, and there's all these beliefs that I haven't thought about since the last time I felt like this. They're all kind of like propped up in this like terrible place, like all these reasons, like, oh shit. And I start, it starts off as a second arrow, it just becomes like this, like really like vicious circle of beliefs, influencing thoughts, influencing emotions, influencing beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. The thing that the problem with that second arrow, the meaning making, is that it adds a lot to the experience, right? It's not just the experience as it is, but it actually creates more and more anxiety or more and more anger or more, right? It actually like fuels the fire. I find like been sitting with something emotionally very difficult lately. And it's been really deep to just more and more settle beneath all the meaning and all the stories and all the thoughts about it, and more just kind of, and it doesn't, to me, I don't know, like it doesn't happen overnight. It kind of takes time, but gradually sinking more and more just into the kind of like raw somatic experience of it. And just the other day, like I was sitting with this friend of mine, he's like, "How are you?" And I'm like, "Oh man, this shit just hurts." Like it feels so, like it feels so simple, but I was like, no, it just physically hurts. Like it literally is just a physical, painful sensation that's like emotionally based. But that's really what's going on. Like there's just the pain in my chest. And I actually find that a lot of times all of that kind of analyzing and unpacking and it's sort of almost a way to not accept it. It's like, it's almost like, no, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna fix it, I'm gonna figure it out, it's like this denial that like, no, this is really here right now. And there's really nothing to do about it. This is just how it feels. And I noticed that another part that mixes into this, I think very substantially, is fear. It's like the fear of our own experience. It's I think one of the things we suffer from a lot as humans is there's a pretty profound distrust of our own selves. A pretty profound distrust of our own experience. And there's this sense that like, no, I better fix this, I better manage it, I better, like you said, it was an interesting, you used this phrase, you said, oh, I'm letting myself go there again, or I'm letting this happen again. Like as though it's some kind of failure on your part. Which, I gotta tell you, that's just not true, man. I mean, that's really like adding insult to injury, I mean, quite literally, right? And this idea that, I've talked about this many times in here. I think there's this like deep cultural idea that like, if you feel bad, that's because you did something wrong. And like, I'm curious how many people feel this. Like, on some level, like whether you've thought it through or not, there's this kind of fantasy that like, if you did everything right, that you would just feel good always. And if you don't feel good, that's because, you fucked up somehow. You blew it. And that if you just did everything right and you were, I don't know, really smart or really competent and really had your shit together, you would just feel awesome all the time. And so anytime you don't feel awesome, it's kind of a failing on your part. I mean, talk about adding insult to injury, right? I mean, that's it. Yeah.
Well, especially when everything is going right,
Hmm.
and you still feel that way. That's really when that double whammy of like, well, I feel like shit, everything's going right, and now you feel guilty for feeling bad.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. It makes me think of that Carl Jung quote where he says, again, I don't remember if anyone remembers the exact quote, but it's something like being like well-adjusted to this kind of insane world is not a sign of psychological health. Right? And so I think even if everything's right, like, our being is very deep, and there's a lot in there, and there's a lot of things going on, and it's funny, I think it's like if something's going on, it's important, I find it's important to honor it. But this is the fine line. I think this is actually like a key part, I think, of this practice. It's the middle path, right? And you've heard that phrase, I hope. But the Buddha said this is about the middle path. But I find that the idea that it's the middle path it's deep. It's like that in every moment there's a middle path, right? So like on one hand, I'll say I think it's very important to honor how we feel and to not push it away and to really be curious and hold it in this compassionate way. But on the flip side, to not be like yanked around by it either. It's this very soft way of being with the experience where you don't chase it, you don't push it away, and you don't let it lead you. Like the image I get is sort of, imagine like you're holding this like very delicate, I don't know, like paper mache, some kind of ultra thin paper mache thing where like a little breeze will blow it right off of your hand. So you want to hold it like just a little bit so it doesn't fly away. But if you apply even just a little too much pressure, you'll crush it. So it's this very delicate balance. And that this cultivation of this like being in the present moment, it's so delicate. It's when you feel it, it's just you're just right on this like balancing on this like tiny little pinhead, or the sharp part of the pin, where it's like you're in the present moment, but you're not adjusting the present moment. Am I making any sense tonight? The thing that we often forget is that there really is a process of, sometimes you hear it as called metabolization or digestion, or that when you're sitting and you're letting this feeling be there, it's not just a static thing. There's actually a process taking place. And in my experience, if I give it room and it does its thing, it actually moves. It doesn't just stay exactly the same. Like when I'm really suffering, it's funny. I play a lot of games with myself. Like if I'm really depressed or something, like if I'm in a bad spot, I just do this thing. I go like, okay, like it's just like you got to clock in. It's like, all right, this is just going to take a certain amount of time. Like it's almost this meter. You're just going to have to feel this for like 50 hours or whatever. And so I'm like, any moment I get, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to clock in some hours right now. Okay. Like, or even minutes. I'm like, all right, just going to be with this. Okay, even if it's just 30 seconds, all right, that's 30 seconds. That's already 30 seconds done, And that's the game, or that's the job, is this like you're just going to have to sit here and digest this for a while. So let's just, even one solid breath. Like if I can just be like, wow, that was just one present breath. It's like, okay, cool. That's one breath down. Good,
There's going to be a question in this somehow, but I feel like a lot of things you're talking about point to mercy.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's I just keep kind of going back to that in my mind, and I'm not sure really like what the right definition is. It's like a gateway drug to compassion, and kind of we talk about it a little bit more high bar sometimes, but with enough practice I've learned that like the sledgehammer isn't the only tool for everything. And I heard it defined something like, mercy is having the power to do harm, but restraining from using that power. And I think that's gone from like just, trying not to practice self-hatred, going, you're fucking up, and you're, inadequate, to like seeing more subtle forms of where I'm doing some harm, maybe just, who knows, just getting carried too far away with a story. Buying into some judgment or something, and going like, oh, now I can kind of see that that can be harmful.
Yeah.
And I should have some mercy when like maybe like be a go. What do you think?
Yeah. I think one of the things we have a really hard time with, like the kind of elephant in the room that we often don't want to acknowledge. And in some ways, I think there's, again, like almost this cultural unspoken agreement where we're all going to pretend not to acknowledge this, which is that we get hurt. That, like, we all as living beings actually have, there's this phenomenon where you can get hurt. And we do. And we just, like, it's this thing that just happens. And we hurt each other. We can get obviously physically hurt, but we emotionally get hurt. And like in any relationship, and there's just this thing that happens where from time to time, either you hurt someone or someone hurts you. And I don't even mean in like some huge way. I actually find sometimes the bigger ones are almost easier because they're like blatant, and it's like, okay, we're going to talk about this. Like there's going to be a little processing that happens about this one. But like the smaller ones are almost like weirder because they don't, they're almost like they almost don't qualify a conversation, but they still hurt. And I notice, I don't know if this is like a man thing, but I notice for me, like I'm actually curious if it's different. Like there's a lot of pride mixed up in it. Like if I get hurt, it's like a pride thing where I don't want to admit it. And especially like, oh my God, as a Buddhist, like I want to believe that I'm above that. It's like, no, I'm not attached. I don't care. Like I don't have an ego, whatever. I don't care. Those are just words. And it's just so not true. It's just so not true. And like, there's just this thing of emotional pain. There's just like someone says something or something, I don't know, whatever. Something happened, you feel rejected or you feel, there's just so many ways we get hurt. But trying to dance around it and sort of like not bow to it, I feel like we create so much more suffering, second, third, 20th arrow. And this way that it makes it so I can't be here now. Because it's like there's always, if there's something in the present moment that I don't want to admit, it becomes very hard to be present. Because, I like to say it's hard to be present and in denial at the same time. Like presence really fucks up your denial. And so just the humility, it's such a relief to be like, I'm like, oh, that's what all this is that hurt. Like I will notice, sometimes I'll sit down and there's just all this like, there's like all this energy, and all this mental activity and this anger and that shouldn't have happened and God damn it, that's what it sounds like inside my head. And then I'm like, what is all this? Jesus, like what is all this? And sometimes I'll be like, dude, you're just hurt. And it's like, oh, it's just this like relief, And the way I'm relating it to mercy, the way you brought that up is that the more I see that and acknowledge it, the more I see and understand others. Like, and then I have compassion for people. Like I see someone doing something weird or something, and I'm like, what the fuck, And it's like, oh, they're hurt. Or this is how they're responding to pain. And that's the thing, is I think that's what we're all doing, actually. Like I actually think a lot of the fucked up shit we see in the world, it's just people responding to pain in very unskillful ways. But that's actually what it is. And it makes me relate to it differently when I see it that way. Yeah.
Just with you saying that, when practicing like metta sometimes, it's very easy for me to find somebody easy to send it to. It's very easy for me to find like a neutral person. A little bit more difficult to give it to myself. Like almost impossible to give it to my ex-husband.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do it, right?
Yeah.
But what you were just saying about the pain is allows me to at least want to give it to him at some point, but I can't do it right now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It softens
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, instead of me being angry towards him, I'm not angry anymore.
Right.
It's just more of a, he deals with things differently than I, you know, or he deals with his pain or whatever it is. He's dealing with a lot of it, I feel.
Mhm.
And so I want him to have more kindness. I'm just not ready to do it. Where I used to replace it with like an anger.
No, absolutely. And I actually think that's a really useful distinction, which is, you know, you can understand that, and yet it doesn't mean you have to take it on or somehow like that makes it okay or it justifies it, because it doesn't. I mean, all the horrible things people do as they're trying to deal with it, it doesn't justify. I mean, it's really, yeah, I mean, if it's harmful stuff, it really is harmful. But it's easier to understand, and I like what you're saying, like just the idea, it's like I can't give it to him, but I have the idea that I potentially could. And that's,
Or at least somebody else.
or somebody else could. I love it, yeah. Right. And I think, and that's what I think actually that's really great. I think that's a great boundary where it's like, yes, someone else could, but I don't have to.
Not right now.
Or not right now, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for teaching and instruction today.
Oh, thank you.
It's really helpful, especially the last comment, the last question. Primarily because this morning my roommate removed the door off my bedroom and threw a ladder down the stairs at me in order to scare me. And he did it because he's in pain and he's fearful.
Uh-huh.
You know, he's hurt, and I get that. How do I not do a spiritual bypass? Because I was able to just sort of sit and it didn't actually come directly at me. It was just this shocking thing. I was able to sit and do my meditation and then sort of go and greet him with love, at least attempt to. But how is that, how do you relate to that energy in a healing, hopeful way without putting yourself into danger?
Yeah, man. That's pretty, it makes me want to talk about the other side, how to not over-spiritualize things. And if someone's taking the door off the hinges and then throwing a ladder at you, I think that's pretty extreme, bro. I think there's times to look at that as like, hey, is this I get it, you're dealing with your pain in unskillful ways, but this is actually dangerous and this is not cool. And I think there's a way to we have to be careful about sort of not over-spiritualizing it where you're supposed to be cool with everything. Especially something that physical where potentially get really hurt. And that just doesn't feel safe to me at all. And I think you may want to take action that's more external and decisive than just sending loving kindness.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and if you're looking, sometimes I kind of like to run a sanity check. I think what we had, I don't know, 80 people here or something. I think we would all agree that's fucked up and unacceptable. Whatever his reasons are.
Yeah, okay.
Where it gets interesting is that to deal with it skillfully, though, it wouldn't be helpful for your own hatred and fear and anger to take over, right? because you don't want to start like throwing a ladder back at him or whatever, you know. I think there's another Buddhist teaching on the second ladder. It's different. No. There isn't. But you know, like to deal with it skillfully, like it's you know, you can love someone or be loving in a way and still have like separation. You know, like Vinny would sometimes say, he's like, yeah, love, but from a distance. So yeah. Well, I hope you deal with that. Yeah. I think, you know, sometimes we can really, I find it helpful to see all these things as humanness, and that we're all human and we're dealing with things and we get lost and we do unskillful things. And yet, you know, it actually makes me think of this quote. If I can read this quote real quick. It's one of my favorites. I have it on here. It's from this Soviet-era dissident writer, Solzhenitsyn. I'm from the Soviet Union originally, so. And he was a writer, and he wrote things that were critical of the government and was imprisoned for a long time. And in the gulags. And he writes this one quote is he says, "If only it were all so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart?" I think, you know, even you know, like today, things are politically, right, very, very charged. There's a lot of anger. And I really feel like the really tragic thing, it's not like which side is winning. It's the way there's more and more separation. It's like the separation itself, and whatever, sometimes it's one side's winning, sometimes it's the other side. But the more and more we don't see the common humanity, even when it's really unskillful. But like he's saying, like, God, wouldn't that be great if it was just like, no, those people over there, they're just evil. And that's all we got to do, is we got to just get rid of them, and then everything will be great. But it never happens, right? It's like, regardless of how politics change or empires change and like history change, it's like, yeah, but there's always, see, that's what I mean. I feel like they're more like these human currents, right? It's like what the Buddha talked about, greed, hatred, and delusion. I kind of like that the way he talks about that is, it's not like, he doesn't say there are greedy people, there are hateful people, it's like, you know, there are delusional people. He said, it's like, no, there's greed, hatred, and delusion. They're like these currents that just kind of run through human nature. Or maybe just, you know, animal nature too. And that our job is to see it in ourselves. You know? It's like to see, like, hey, how am I being hateful in this moment? How am I being greedy in this moment? Like, how am I relating to that wind, right? That current or that energy? It's funny. It's like we like seeing it in others, right? There's a lot of, it's like, yeah, well, you're being hateful, and you're. I noticed lately this thing happens where I'm sort of pointing out at somebody else's hatefulness, but I'm kind of shocked by the amount of hatred I'm actually doing it with. And I think this is the theme I'm getting at, is this commonality, which is like, that other person's hatred is not actually different than my own hatred. That other person's greed is not different from my greed, or even like this greed. And the difference can actually be how skillfully and compassionately and kindly do I meet that experience in myself. How much wisdom can I bring, and can I relate to these experiences that are actually very universal, but can I relate to them in a different way? Can I relate to them in a new way? Can I relate to them in a skillful way that the Buddha's teachings point to? As do other traditions. It's not like it's exclusive to Buddhism. Because that's actually the issue. It's how we relate to these things, how we hold them, how we manage them, how we understand them. And I think when we relate to them as something that we take personally, like, oh, this is about me and the way I suck, and da-da-da, that's really unskillful, because it's such a distraction. It's such a distracted way to look at it, because it's like you can just get caught in that whole story so easily, right? And it's the most compelling story there is, right? That story about you, right? Always tune into that one. And so for me, like, that's like, I think the first step is seeing it as, oh, this isn't about me, this is a more universal thing. And then, like, you can bring in that, what you said, that childlike curiosity, like, hey, what is this? Because that kind of, like, when we take it so personally, it's like, no, I'm sort of like, I don't want to, this means bad things about me. It makes me want to run away from the experience, because I don't want to be having it. Because it's like I'm the one who's hateful, which is different than like, no, this is what hatred feels like. This is the phenomenon of hatred, not me, the hateful one, the one that is hateful or greedy or delusional or whatever. And then that frees us up to really learn about it, to really explore it, which is what the Buddha's invitation was to see these things for what they are, and to understand them on a deep level, understand their nature, understand the causes and conditions, and how these things play out. Maybe that's good for now. Announcements?
Sure, I'll make it quick. This weekend, we have a non-residential retreat here with Aya Anandabodhi and Aya Santachita. It is Dana-based only, so
You don't have to pay to register or anything. Just come, and whatever you can contribute, that's great. They're going to be teaching Friday night, and then we will have a day-long Saturday with them and a day-long Sunday. And I believe the topic is going to be on the 5 hindrances. So that should be fantastic. They're really, I know there's some people in this room, every time I announce this, they smile and nod their heads. They're really awesome, fantastic teachers. And then on August 5th, which is a Saturday, we're having a Sangha picnic. It's going to be at McLaren Park from 11 till 4. So if you have any interest in joining us, there's flyers for that at the desk. And lastly, we're able to keep the doors open and have this space available for everyone to practice due to your generosity, the generosity of everyone who's come in before. So whatever you can afford to contribute, the Donna basket's on the desk here, and it's much appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you. You know, just when you said generosity, I just want to add that, you know, we're talking about hatred and greed. There's also some really beautiful universal feelings, like generosity and kindness and beauty and wonder and love, and they also are the same. There's like real quick footnote. It's like it's you know, this wide range of these energies or these feelings or whatever we want to call them. It's really nice to feel them. Like sometimes if you get if you feel some generosity, let yourself pause and let yourself actually feel it. Like don't just do the generous thing, but just like if you catch like a little generous wind, like just like feel it like a breeze, you know? And actually the reason I want to throw this in, sorry we're over time, but I realize we talk about the difficult feelings so much. This stuff is actually easier to practice with the pleasant ones. And you can actually kind of build up a capacity just going, oh, I feel some kindness. Let me just feel that again in this just somatic, direct way. And it's easier. It's way more enjoyable than like let me just feel hatred. But it kind of teaches you, and then you know you're just cultivating this capacity to just be with experience as it is. And I actually find like by practicing it with the pleasant ones, the capacity to then be with the difficult ones actually grows substantially. So just a little footnote there. It's not just about greed and hatred. So bring your awareness back to your body. May the merit generated by us coming together like this as a Sangha, as a community, to support each other's practice, to explore and study and look at the human condition and these tendencies and instincts and energies, so we can understand them deeper and see the impersonal nature of them, so as to be less driven by them, so we can be present and free. We dedicate and share this merit with beings everywhere. May we all be free.